The John C. Stennis Space Center is a NASA rocket testing facility. It is located in Hancock County, Mississippi, on the banks of the Pearl River at the Mississippi-Louisiana border. As of 2012, it is NASA's largest rocket engine test facility. Keep in mind that this is called a rocket testing facility, but there are many conspiracies that suggest that it's a weather manipulation center. I want to point out also that it is located in Hancock County and is also at the border of Mississippi and Louisiana, where we've been seeing a lot of weather disasters. And one thing I want to point out about these so-called weather disasters that seem to be targeted in the areas of Louisiana, Mississippi, the Gulf areas, these so-called weather disasters haven't always occurred like we see them occurring today in these areas. And I think it's something to lock in mind that the Stennis Space Center is in Hancock County, because Hancock County was a county that was severely damaged from Hurricane Katrina on August 29, 2005. In fact, the county was the scene of the final landfall of the quote-unquote eye of Hurricane Katrina, and its communities and infrastructure suffered some of the most intense damage inflicted by that storm. These severe disasters in these targeted areas such as Louisiana, Mississippi, didn't always occur in these areas. These so-called hurricanes and severe storms didn't begin in these areas until many of these space centers were constructed in the areas. Prior to a lot of these space centers, we don't have a history of hurricanes and severe storms in these areas. These storms came out of nowhere, and they don't behave like natural storms. NASA could very well be a space program, meaning that they literally control space by the mass displacement of people, by weather manipulation, under the guise of space centers and rocket engine test facilities. And as a result of displacing the masses, they are able to obtain land and space. So the space program literally is a program that gains control over large, valuable areas and land just by the displacement of people via weather manipulation. And I'm going to share a lot of evidence to support that as we move on. The initial requirements for NASA's proposed rocket testing facility required the site to be located between the rocket's manufacturing facility at Mike Hood Assembly Facility in eastern New Orleans, Louisiana, and the launch facility at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. These different centers that we see in the southeast United States are a chain of weather manipulation devices disguised as rocket engine testers. And these chain of weather manipulation devices work together to seed catastrophic weather events in targeted areas. I just want to give some more history of the Stennis Space Center because I thought it was important. There's a history of displacing the people in these southern areas that goes all the way back to the 1960s. So NASA announced the formation of the Mississippi Test Facility, now known as Stennis Space Center, on October 25, 1961 for testing engines for the Apollo program. So John C. Stennis Space Center was originally called the Mississippi Test Facility, and there's a dark history with NASA and the residents of this area. And here are a couple of pictures here of the Mississippi Test Facility, now called the John C. Stennis Space Center. So some more important things I think we need to know about Stennis. Stennis is home to America's premier rocket engine test complex. Stennis was supposed to be a new age, a new generation of space launch systems. When I think about the term space launch systems, and you think about these machines as weather control tools and how they are causing a massive displacement of people, then the term space launch systems start to take a new meaning. Stennis tested the first and second Saturn V rocket stages for NASA's Apollo program, which we know that program is shrouded in conspiracy, including those used to carry humans to the moon, and we know the moon missions have been proven to be faked and staged. In the late 1960s and early 70s, there was a saying in the community surrounding Stennis. If you want to go to the moon, you first have to go through Hancock County, Mississippi. So since we know the moon missions were fake, what was this really all about? What was this construction of these new centers in these southern areas about? In early 2015, Stennis began testing RS-25 rocket engines that will help power the SLS vehicle at launch. So these RS-25 rocket engines that's supposed to be being tested at Stennis, here's just a little picture of what they look like. As you can see here to the far right, one of the SR-25 engines supposedly being tested. You can pull this up on Wikipedia, and these are the RS-25s that was just spoke of. We don't have to read all of this. I basically wanted to show you a picture of what they look like, and I wanted you to keep this picture in your mind. This whole testing facility in Mississippi is supposedly testing these engines, what you see in front of you, but I don't think that they're testing engines. I think this is all a throw-off, and I think what you're looking at is a cloud-making machine passed off as an engine. A weather-launching attack center dedicated to attacking U.S. civilians in the South and displacing people there in Texas. Why? Because Texas have the less strict gun laws. Texas have the most guns than any other U.S. state. Texas have been known to fight back throughout history. In order to disarm America, you start with Texas. Texas have a history of being rebellious and revolutionary. But the whole attack on this area can be traced back even to the Comanche Wars. The warfare and technology now is getting more high-tech and sinister, and NASA have achieved the ability to manipulate weather. So what they've given us here as a RS-25 engine on one hand, and they're saying they're testing this engine at this Stennis Space Center. On another hand, there are several video clips that have surfaced showing this very same machine participating in the cloud making process. This is a godlike ability that they have achieved that they're not sharing with the public. And me personally, I think that NASA's ability to control the weather with these devices can be hidden behind a cover story like we're just testing rocket engines, and this is just an engine testing facility, and these are just rocket engines. That can be argued whether or not these are just rocket engines or cloud makers. And the reason I say that is because of the video footage from the video clip that you're about to look at right about now.
This is the shuttle's fuel tank. It may only be 130 miles to space, but to cover that distance, the engines will use 500,000 gallons of fuel. And that works out at 2 feet to the gallon. Despite the cost, however, NASA does need to test these engines once in a while. So they built this place in the wetlands of Mississippi. The first thing they installed was a huge loudspeaker, through which they played white noise to simulate the sound of a rocket. They then sent a number of trucks in different directions out into the wilderness, and the drivers were ordered to stop when the noise levels became acceptable. This gave them an imaginary boundary line, and anyone living on the inside of it was offered a simple choice. Stay, and you'll never hear another television program as long as you live. Or take the NASA shilling and get out. No one stayed, and NASA ended up with exactly what it wanted. 125,000 acres of nothing. They even had to move 5 cemeteries, because the noise they were planning on making would wake the dead. Don't worry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I couldn't even hear myself. This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And, as it turns out, the cleanest. Now, the most amazing thing is that that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapour. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. I told you, it's raining. That's unbelievable. Oh. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
So as you can see, the space program is literally just that. A program that seemed to be dedicated to controlling space, whether it be above you, below you, or around you. And there's definitely a conspiracy with NASA surrounding weather control and weather as a form of weaponry to attack U.S. citizens and spark massive displacements of people. It seems to be not about launching rockets, but creating man-made disasters and launching massive groups of people from their homeland and residences. The following article in front of you is from NASA's website. This is the Stennis Space Center, the Space Launch System here. They call this a Space Launch System. But as you can see, just like what was demonstrated in the previous video clip from BBC, this thing is not about launching rockets. It's about making clouds. Here in a second, I'm going to show you that those so-called rocket engines are really cloud makers. And later I will show you that the journey to Mars is really their journey to launch mankind into a World War III. Mars means war. The planet is red like blood. When you deal with the planets that NASA give us, they're all mythology. And when they say a journey to Mars is a journey to war, but the war is cold, the war is covert, you don't know you're being attacked. People just think that it's a natural disaster. But these same lands have been attacked for hundreds of years. So space launch systems are to launch people away from their land and create free space. Because what you witnessed in the previous video, they did a fake rocket sound and it was very, very loud. That created what's called a buffer zone. That buffer zone is really NASA's nice way of saying we're forcing people to leave their residence by noise pollution. Who could live next to something that loud? And these people are thinking that they're living next to a rocket test facility. And NASA is playing fake rocket sounds that's very loud. And this place really has nothing to do with the rockets, but it really has everything to do with moving those people out of the land. So if the sound don't move you out, then they will flood you away from this land with this cloud making machine that they're passing off as a space launch system, which is really just launching massive amounts of people away from their homeland and residences and indeed creating space. So now the space program really takes on a new lease with this information. As you can see, this thing is always shown making clouds. Since the conception of so-called space launch systems, which are weather-controlled devices, there has been strange anomaly with weather in our time, especially in those targeted locations that I'm speaking about in this video. And these so-called natural disasters only start to come about when these space centers came onto the scene. Ever since these SLSs or weather control devices have popped up in certain parts of the U.S., mainly the southeastern U.S., there have been strange anomaly in weather, especially in those targeted locations that I'm speaking about. But not only that, there have been clouds we've witnessed in our lifetime that have not been witnessed in ancient time. They say there's nothing new under the sun, but in our lifetime, we've witnessed man-made weather to the point where with geoengineering and aluminum aerosol and different chemicals and cocktails and chemtrails, they've managed to create all type of bizarre looking clouds that isn't natural. NASA identifies this as a rolling cloud. But nature didn't make this, and they won't tell you that they have the capability to make this hideous, unnatural phenomena. These things are used to seed weather disasters and attack U.S. citizens in strategic parts of this land. So if you do a little reading below, you can see that the text says about this RS-25 engine, basically saying that it's being tested at one of these sites there at Stennis. But I want you to pay attention to this like I told you before, because like I said, this is actually what's generating the clouds. And now we're going to check out another video. So apparently this cloud maker, RS-25 engine, was designed for a series of rockets called the Thor Delta series, as you can see here. And the words they use for these things are just a dead giveaway. For example, when you talk Hurricane Harvey, the word Harvey means battle ready. And this is an act of war. The name chosen for these rockets, Thor Delta, says a lot because Thor is the god of thunder. He's a god that has control over the weather. He's a god that's able to rule the people by threatening them with that ability. Thor has been known in mythology to cause great massive storms, and he's known for his use of rain as a weapon. And all of these mythological gods are just scientific concepts.
It will actually rain. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
And all of these mythological gods are just scientific concepts that the elite actually manifest.
NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
Thor being the name of this whole weapon system that controls the weather. Delta being the area that's been the most attacked. The Mississippi Delta areas, the Louisiana Delta areas. The Delta was often flooded in ancient day, meaning the mouth of the Nile. The Delta symbolizes the female vulva. And this is all cosmological science dealing with the mother goddess, dealing with the waters above, waters below, and the great floods in creation, and the great floods in pregnancy, and the waters being broken in pregnancy equivalent to the waters being separated in creation. Everything they do is a divine language. Now what I mean when I say divine language is just what I just demonstrated. Thor, Delta, Thor being the god of thunder and weather, Delta being the area that all of this is taking place. And not only that, the hurricane was formed on August 17th, which was a Thursday or a Thor's Day. Thursday is dedicated to the Greek god Thor. This was a ritual attack because the hurricane dissipated on September 2nd, which is Saturday or Sabbath day, the day of balance, or the Greek god El, which restores the balance or dissipates the storm after the waters flooded. There was also a deity that predated El by the name of Ma'at, who restored the balance after the flood. So they picked two symbolic days. It started on Thor's Day. That was the day it formed. It dissipated on Saturday, symbolizing the end of the storm. they're not only attacking us physically, they're attacking us spiritually. They're using microcosm and macrocosm magic. They can bring mythology to life in our reality. The deities they use in mythology are synced to certain days of the week. The times and days they do certain ritual attacks are very important to them. This is why I decode the occult secrets behind all of the madness. Thor being the god that attacks with weather, Delta being the area that's being attacked. So what we looking at now is a top view of Hancock County, Mississippi. And if you look closely at the map, you can see the NASA test site was known as Stennis, used to be Mississippi Testing Center. And you also can see an idea of the buffer zone. But to give you a little idea of the history of this flooding, what we're seeing today in these areas is really nothing new. So before construction began, 5 small communities plus the northern portion of a 6th and a combined population of 700 families had to be completely relocated off the facility. And what they mean by that is, again, noise pollution. They created a buffer zone with fake rocket noise, and they basically forced the people off their residences. So the effort acquired more than 3,200 parcels of privately owned land, and there was no fight at all, and NASA didn't pay a dime to acquire none of this valuable land. It included 786 residences, 16 churches, 19 stores, 3 schools, and a wide assortment of commercial buildings, including nightclubs and community centers. So the flooding that's going on right now, if you ask me, is their attempt to expand their land. So they don't necessarily have to move the facilities if they can improve how far out they're able to see the weather. And they can see this weather out cross country almost. So these clouds move pretty fast, and they can acquire more land and expand their land in their space by pushing people out of these areas with this weather. So again, NASA literally controls space. The 13,500 acre site was selected on October 25, 1961 on the Mississippi Test Facility or Pearl River site. On December 18, 1961, NASA officially designated the facility as NASA Mississippi Test Operations. The test area, officially known as the Phi area, is surrounded by a 125,000 acre acoustical buffer zone. Starting in 1971, all Space Shuttle main engines were flight certified at Stennis. On June 14, 1974, the site was renamed National Space Technology Laboratories, a name that continued until May 20th, 1988, when it was renamed for Mississippi Senator and Space Program supporter John C. Stennis. Now, it is important for me to stop here and to inform you that John C. Stennis himself is a very interesting man. And shortly we will explore just briefly who John C. Stennis is, because I think that's important. With the end of the Apollo and shuttle programs, use of the base decreased with economic impact to the surrounding communities. So there was an economic impact to the communities when this space center moved in town. And the residents here wasn't happy at all. And not only was there an economic impact, but the reason the use of the base had decreased because they had already ran all of the residents away like they wanted to.
The first thing they installed was a huge loudspeaker, through which they played white noise to simulate the sound of a rocket. And the drivers were ordered to stop when the noise levels became acceptable. This gave them an imaginary boundary line, and anyone living on the inside of it was offered a simple choice. Stay, and you'll never hear another television program as long as you live. Or take the NASA shilling and get out. No one stayed. And NASA ended up with exactly what it wanted. 125,000 acres of nothing.
The purpose of the base was noise attack. During these times in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there were floods, guys. And so when they say that the use of the base decreased, it wasn't until after those noise attacks and after those floods. They ran away all of the residences, and they acquired the land for free. They acquired the land by force. They later came up with different programs for the residences to kind of compensate them for stealing their land. But even then, the whole scheme behind those programs was to usher in the whole mortgage deception. So they killed so many birds with one stone here. And I'm going to get into all of that here shortly. So what we call Stennis Space Center was located approximately 88 kilometers northeast of New Orleans in Hancock County, Mississippi. That's important to keep in mind. All of these areas been under heavy weather attacks ever since then, and it's still going on today. The massive displacement of people from these areas. You see, to clear the people of this land in the beginning, they had the noise attack. No one gonna live around all of these loud rockets. When they created this buffer zone, they don't even need to have loud rocket sounds anymore because there's no one around this place for miles. So they're actually now have the area clear where they can make all of this noise, create these clouds. No one's around to see this stuff being created for miles. Next thing you know, miles and miles away in Texas, they experienced record-breaking rainfall. The kind of rainfall that hit the ground over there, I don't think we've ever seen it. I think they broke records. And this is not nature. I really believe that this is NASA. I really believe that this is man-made, and so do Richard from Boston. Check this video out.
What's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. It's the 31st of August. It's 2017, and this is our headline once again. Once again. It's like clockwork, isn't it? Every single solitary summer, we have something crazy go down. And this year, 15 or 12 years later, I forget off the top of my head, we have Hurricane Harvey decimating large majorities of Texas, and they're already warning that gas may run out by Labor Day. Meanwhile, we've got chemical plants that spark new worries in storm-soaked Texas. All of this, absolutely all of this was by design. I put this video up late last night that was showing what you're looking at right now. This was NASA yesterday releasing all this moisture into the atmosphere under the guise of getting the rocket ready. Their very, very next door neighbor is getting hammered by a hurricane that keeps going back out into the ocean, gathering more water and coming back in, back out and back in. I live on the ocean. Many people live on the ocean. A hurricane is a natural event, just like weather. It moves in, it does its thing, and moves out. It doesn't sit in an area for days and days and days. It doesn't keep going back out to sea to gather more water and then come back in and dump that water. And even if any of this stuff were natural, how incredibly irresponsible would it be for NASA in the very next state to be doing this in the atmosphere, which is absolutely, without a doubt, 100% fact, this causes mass precipitation. They had to do this yesterday. On August 30th, 2017, while Hurricane Harvey is killing people and leaving people homeless, they had to do this yesterday. It seems kind of like a plan, doesn't it? Well, take a look at this. iPet Go 2. Take a look at this right here, this scene. Notice this right here. Notice the oil refineries in the background with the storm clouds over them going on and off. And notice that the oil is dumping into the sea. Does that look an awful lot like something that would make you think of Houston, Texas? Does that make you think of everything that we're seeing right now? Does that make you think of the storm-soaked Texas where refinery plants may blow up, explode? It's unbelievable that this is all occurring. Meanwhile, certain people don't believe any of this is accurate whatsoever at all. They think it's specifically HAARP. They don't seem to understand that many times, including last year in West Virginia, people like Ron Johnson on Stranger Than Fiction News showcased how NextRad was showing all the power plants working in unison in West Virginia. Now, this is the flood that I went to with a couple of other YouTube channels, and we brought supplies and we gave them labor for 2 days. Drove day and night to get out there to West Virginia to help these people. What happened to them was absolutely otherworldly. Not something that was done by God, because, again, Ron Johnson, Stranger Than Fiction News, caught this on the next rad, where he was literally catching them pulsing the storm all the way across the country till it finally hit West Virginia and then dumped 5 to 6 feet of water in hours. And we saw it firsthand. The water was way over my head. And it was odd also because there was a revival of sorts for people that were finding their way back to Jesus at the same time. So that was 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, Texas, what's their sin? Why would it be Texas? Because Texas per capita has more patriots, more gun owners, more people that have their own resources. Texas has threatened to secede from the Union numerous times. Texas has their own oil refineries. Texas has their own shores, shipping, so forth, so on. So that's what happens. And again, predictive programming, things like we see in this right here, iPet Goat, this has gone on for years, and this is a clear harbinger right here. Now watch the very next scene and look in the background. Tell me that's not Texas. You see what I'm saying? At any rate, Richie from Boston, like, share, subscribe. I'm having a hell of a time getting a hold of Dane Wigington. He's been very busy, and that might not go through. I'm not exactly sure. Richie from Boston, I am out.
So we see what's going on with Harvey today. We look back and remember that a corridor from Texas and Louisiana to Missouri was hammered with major floods in 2015. A massive flood swamped parts of southern and eastern Louisiana in August 2016, in a string of more than a dozen flood events that have affected parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Missouri since March 2015. The most recent event, from a swath of up to 31 inches of rain in just 2 days' time, flooded tens of thousands of homes, led to at least 20,000 rescues, and also triggered significant flooding in parts of southeast Missouri and southern Illinois. So all of these states, Missouri, Illinois, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, they all have something in common. Remember what I said earlier? They are all part of what's called the U.S. Delta region, starting with one of the most important, which is the Mississippi Delta. We understand the importance of the Mississippi River. So this Gulf area is very important. The areas in this map are considered the U.S. Delta. And remember what I told you earlier, the name of the rockets for these so-called engines, which are cloud makers, is called a Thor Delta series. And I went over that previously, the deity Thor and Delta being these regions. But it don't stop there. The rabbit hole goes even deeper. Join me for part 2, because there's so many more things I have to reveal to you concerning this so-called Hurricane Harvey, which is really an attack by NASA. And NASA is one of the most important factions of our military. U.S. citizens don't even know that we're under attack. The mission to Mars, in my opinion, is their attempt to steer us right into World War III. I'm on to their magic, and I have so much more to share with you guys so that you can share. We gotta wake people up. We're under attack, and how convenient would it be for them to have the control over weather and to be able to attack citizens without us even knowing it, because we thinking it's just natural weather. Please join me for part 2, because there's so much more information and valuable revelations. Knowledge is power. And again, I thank each and every last one of you for joining in. Fear not. Peace and much love.